Well, hello my little kits, and welcome back to Rimworld. Previously, I gave you a rundown on the entire scenario and what to expect, with our biggest threat simply being the local wildlife. Local hostilities will only rise from this point onward as each day passes by, and our main threat still lies stalking within the shadows. However, the question still remains, how will this affect our colonists pushing forward? And how will they persevere? Will they persevere? Honestly, who's to say? But I can promise you this much, there is far more on the horizon for you to see. This is only just the beginning. Continuing right from the last episode, there were two main things that we really needed right now. Steel and tons of stone. We needed to get a lot of walls placed down. While this playthrough won't exactly be using kill boxes in any traditional sense of the word, I'm also not an idiot, and I'm well aware of the effectiveness of walls and funneling enemies in through an area that you can easily predict. There's a reason why we as a species built castles in the medieval ages. They were incredibly fucking effective at what they did. With the squad assigned their individual duties, I let them go about it, and then we are hit with one of what I expect to be many weather-related incidents in the future. A heatwave. This isn't exactly a big issue, but it has the potential to be super duper annoying, especially if you're not paying attention to temperature of your colonists, since they can definitely die of heat stroke. What's worse is that I don't have any air conditioners up at all. I didn't plan on making any until winter was over, so we definitely need to get up at least one of them so that our colonists can have a much better time dealing with the temperature changes. After the first day of the heat wave, RPG was the only one that was experiencing any level of heat stroke whatsoever, so I just had him sit inside of the freezer for a little while and then deal with it. Our first air conditioner was set up in the workshop, so we have that up and going for whenever that people need to cool down. So the rest of this should go over pretty smoothly once it's wired up. Although I wish I could get air conditioners inside of their rooms, cause man, 50 degrees Celsius inside of a bedroom, there is no way that that's comfortable. I'm not seeing heat stroke, but still, that is not a comfortable heat to sleep in. Morning arrives and RPG gets to research inside of a cool, air-conditioned room. Meanwhile, Mechanoids is gathering stones, and Rayaka and Grey are just continuing the mining job for the steel just outside of the door. I realize a bit of a slight problem right now, too, in fact. The first being that we actually don't have enough power to keep everything up and running right now, so I decided to make a solar panel. We will need to hook it up to batteries in order to get it to reach peak effectiveness, however. The second problem was a little bit more urgent. Our heel root field was starting to look a lot more potato-like in origin. We only have a limited amount of time to grow crops before winter time hits, and cotton takes up a majority of that time even if you start right at the get-go. If I'm being honest, this mistake right here is definitely by far the most embarrassing one that I have made so far with this colony. RPG, the commander of the SS Inari, named after a Shinto harvest god, didn't realize that he planted the wrong fucking seeds inside of the cotton field until they started to sprout. This is like an NBA professional scoring 10 three-point shots and then realizing in the third quarter that he had the wrong fucking jersey on and was playing for the opposite team. Oh my god. It's fine. It's fine. So the battery bank is done and the steel is almost completely mined out. There we go. That's progress. Later that night, we were hit with a raid from the colony known as the Treaty of Squabe. Not 100% sure how that's supposed to be pronounced, but alright. Luckily, they were nice enough to wait until morning before they had finally done their raid on the base, and they were dispatched with ease. One of them was left alive at the end of the engagement, so, well, you know where that's going. The other was not so lucky. While charging at our colonists, butt naked and with an axe, he took an instantaneous and unlucky fatal shot to the chest. This makes Billa the first person that RPG has ever killed. He makes sure to hollow out a grave to the southern end of the colony, and give them a proper burial, as well as a send-off, and a prayer of sorts. Their death will weigh heavily on his conscience. May the light of Inari guide your way, my friend. After a bit of cleanup, I decided that we needed to work on the next structure within our base. We needed a prison. We needed one, immediately, and preferably with as many actual beds in it as humanly possible so that we can properly treat those that are wounded within raids. I went with what you see on the screen. Green would just simply be where the beds are. I figured that we definitely weren't going to need 12 beds right now, since we just simply aren't seeing raids that big, and it just would be a waste of building walls and using stone that we could use for other things, so I decided to cut it in half for now, and in worst case scenario, we'll just expand it and use the blueprints as a measure for how much more that we need. And then you can just move the walls back further. It's super easy to do. While Rayaka was working on the prison, Meganeko was working on the northern wall. This patch of potatoes still pisses me off. I just wanted to point that one out, but we're gonna wait until we can actually harvest it before we can change over to heel root. On the next day, the heat wave finally ends. Thank God. We've also wrapped up mining all of the steel just immediately to the left of the freezer and have double-walled it to make sure that there's plenty of insulation there, so that's a thing that's done. We have 825 steel because of it, which is quite a bit, but we'll definitely burn through that very quickly. Also, if you haven't noticed it by this point in time, we definitely have a battery bank up and going. Just one singular large battery and in a very small shack over there by the freezer. That's going to bite me in the ass quite a bit by the end of this recording session, trust me, we'll get there though. Speaking of ass biting, we have a raid from the nation of Mayabor. They're attacking immediately. I hope you brushed your pubes this morning, Grey, because you're going to be spearheading this defense. The fight lasts a little bit longer than it really should have because they're smart and they decided to use trees as cover, but they were still not really much of a threat. Well, go on, you know what's next. Into the dungeon. This now makes 3 prisoners that are now bleeding out all over the floor in our lab/kitchen/workshop. That's incredibly sanitary. And Jaguar almost didn't make it. Feeling stressed. Well, I'm going to say that that's probably on account of the bullet in your right femur. That sounds extremely uncomfortable, to say the least. What have we learned today, Jaguar? Stop throwing rocks at my colonists, and then you will not get a bullet to the femur. Hopefully that's the lesson. Mega Neko finally stabilizes Jaguar, and then we release Black onto the wild. Tell your friends. I can't help but notice Rayaka stop what she's doing at the stone block cutting bench, move over into the storage area, and smoke a fat doobie. We had 5 of these babies during the raid where we picked these up, by the way. I just totally forgot to tell people to stop fucking smoking them. So now 3 of our 4 colonists are as high as a kite. Cool. I'm just gonna go ahead and disallow that. Yeah, there we go. The following day, I released another one of our prisoners, Tokamo. It's so liberating to just watch them walk to the edge of the map and disappear into the ether. I decided to optimize storage a little bit by making a steel skip to hold, of course, our steel right next to the stone cutting bench. There's going to be another steel skip that we'll have for all of our wood and such. It's just because those things you're going to have just large amounts of them, and rather than have 47 different piles of them, might as well put them into one storage area. Deep storage is honestly a mod that I don't think that I could live without in Rimworld by this point. Seeing how he had only one singular smoke leaf joint left over and Grey was the only person who hasn't smoked one yet, I figured fuck it, might as well get him to use the last one there and clear up our storage space a little bit. Our prison is just about done, it just needs to be roofed at this point, and then make some sleeping areas for the future prisoners that we will have in the area, and our north wall is just about done, it just needs a doorway. Which means it's time for the next project, making a comm station. I have intentionally avoided looking at my map until I had made these things because from a role-playing standpoint, I figured the comm station was the reasoning why you were able to map out the area. So that's the next thing that we definitely need to do. This is going to be what the colonists use as any kind of intel to surrounding area and colonies. And that's not even mentioning the real utility behind the comms console, which is just the fact that you can trade with ships. I don't know if that's specifically a mod-based thing, but I don't think it is. I do believe that having more of them is a mod that I have, however. So this is going to definitely speed up a lot of our trading possibilities, which is really weird because I have seen, like, absolutely no traders during this playthrough, which is really odd. By the next day, the console was up, and I decided to use it to call the Nation of Mayabor to lower our goodwill by another 10 points, just because I don't want to amass goodwill by just releasing prisoners all day long, so that's one of the main reasons why we have this. And then I decided to take our first look at the map since when I had first dropped onto the planet, because I don't remember where the hell that we were. There's not really anything of note here. There are plenty of points of interest all over the place. However, I do want to point out that we don't have a single Nyaron settlement anywhere remotely close to us, so it's going to be quite a hike whenever that we need to do this. And trust me, I have planned events in the future for doing such adventures out into the landscape. That's another thing during this playthrough as well that I do want to make kind of paramount, is I want it to be about exploring the world. That's the main reasoning why I'm not just hiring colonists like crazy, and I have like an idea in my mind for how many to have, as well as scaling. I want there to be a purpose to go and explore the shit that's out there. Unfortunately, however, in the base game of Rimworld, it's just not very well incentivized to do plenty of caravans. It's extremely dangerous, it splits up your manpower between 2 different areas, it's not usually worth it, so I'm going to make it worth it. Back to the colony, however, with our workstations just steadily increasing, I realized that we do not have nearly enough space inside of our workshop. I'm going to massively expand this later on down the line, however, for now we're just going to make it a little bit wider. After all, we do need a tailoring bench, and I would like to put that writing desk down somewhere, so I figured there would be a nice little divide that we could do to make a nice eating area, possibly add in a pool table somewhere as well. The following day was mostly uneventful. I didn't really do a whole lot of anything, but just try to tend to the garden and whatnot, and I believe that we added a few more of the storage spaces for food. If it looks weird regarding the gardening and all that other stuff that we're doing with plants, it's because Mechanoids currently has an inspiration for sowing 50 crops right now. There's a mod that I have that changes how inspirations work, and colonists will get either a positive or a negative mood debuff depending on if they fulfill that inspiration. The weird thing is I have both of these checked off. It shouldn't even really be happening, which I think it just doesn't do the mood stuff anymore or tell you if it's fulfilled. So I basically wasted my time trying to do this to make sure that she could get that inspiration filled. By the next day, however, our workshop has been properly expanded, and we are now fully floored with marble tiling, which is nice. I have now become an optimist. One of the most common things that can happen with one of the mods that I have is it allows your traits of your colonists to change over time depending on certain things. Now, if you keep their moods up to a certain level, they'll become optimistic, which is really fucking nice. I have a very specific setting for what traits can and cannot be changed over time, considering that this mod essentially lets any trait ever just change and disappear or be gained, which I'm not particularly a big fan of, especially when it comes to traits that don't make sense to change. But either way, I have very specific settings for it, and it'll be neat over time. I'll let you know if I wind up doing anything manually for trait changing, but we'll just go through with the punches for now. We continue to tend to the garden, and then finally set up a heal root patch. Finally. We are going to need a lot of heal root for this playthrough. A day passes, and then something that I have been anticipating for a long time now finally happens. We are raided by the Rabby clan. This is a bit of an issue right now. Due to all of our other projects that we've been doing right now, RPG has now been focusing on research, which means that we do not have the means of making planetarium right now to sate their addiction. This means that we cannot hold this person prisoner for too terribly long, or they're going to go batshit crazy and wander, and they're not going to be able to be released properly. Furthermore, she's carrying a fucking minigun, which is not exactly the nicest thing to be a fighter against when you have nothing but short-range weaponry like PDWs. It also just so happens to be not the kind of weapon that I wanted her to run in here with. If she had an assault rifle, that would be amazing, because then we can repurpose it later on down the line, but no, I don't think I'm going to wind up using a minigun, unfortunately. Now, this right here, this was an interesting combat segment right here. This is kind of the thing that I'm looking for when it comes to the actual firefights that I want in Rimworld. These are super fun to do. There was a lot of cover swapping, moving from tree to tree, using buildings as cover, and just overall trying to flank this one individual to be able to gain any and all advantages that we possibly could. Eventually, though, she messed up and she did a really stupid mistake and tried to engage Mechanoids in melee combat, to which she just dropped like a fly afterwards. It's a good thing, too, our bullets were not doing anything to her armor, so that could have been detrimental after a while. This is a major win for the Fox faction, by the way. We got about 150 bullets out of this, a minigun that I'll never use, and more importantly, goodwill on the Rabby faction. This is major for the Fox faction right now. And of course, since something good happened to us, that means that something equally bad needs to completely shit on the parade. We get hit with our first eclipse here. Now the problem with solar power is that not only are solar flares bad, but eclipses are just as bad for your power grid. And let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, when I installed that solar panel, we got hit with an awful lot of eclipses for some reason. I do not know what that is. Regardless, however, I finally get around to getting everything scraped off of the potato field so that we can finally get our cotton going. I decided to shoot this kappa so that we could get them to just leave the area of our base. There's nothing more annoying than having animals around that are just trying to scrap bodies that you have inside of your dumping zone and whatnot. So I just decided to completely rectify that issue altogether before it even happens. I actually considered hiring Vivis for a minute, but she has horrendous traits and stats, just absolutely horrendous. And then we were visited by some bumble drones. They didn't really do much, they just kind of sat there and existed. On the following day, I decided to designate more mining. By the way, did you know that if you hit the equals button on your keyboard whenever that you touch an ore vein, it actually just highlights the whole vein for mining? That is super useful. I've played this game for 430 hours and I never knew about this. Later, I realized that when you butcher a kappa, it actually gives you human meat, so rather than just suffer any possible consequences from having that in our storage, I decided to throw it into a dumping zone outside of the wall. And then Trumbull decided to knock on my front door again. Since they so graciously decided to wait until we were good and ready, I decided to build up the northeast wall. Quick, you have 5 seconds to guess how this went for me. Just kidding, Manhunter Pack to the southeast. Why are granite doors so hard to fucking make? I had to tell Mechanoids to stop building said door in order to deal with what could only be described as a pack of angry billy goats with tasers strapped to their faces. And then the real threat decided to bum rush us while our pants were down. Well played, human. Well played. This led to a hilarious race against the clock to see if I could get the door built by the time the raiders had reached the wall. One of them did manage to squeak by, however this was balanced by the fact that he brought a beer bottle to a sword fight. Don't bonk, Mechanoids, you son of a bitch. The rest of the raid was pretty easy from this point on. One of the raiding colonists did, however, perish in this fight, so that now makes 2 graves that RPG needs to dig up. Don't worry, buddy, there's gonna be plenty more where that came from. We assessed the wounded and released Vivis as all do-gooders do, and the rest of the day was pretty smooth. Unless, of course, your name is RPG. RPG had a really bad day. I finally got around to setting my own personalized drug policies as well, so yeah, that's good. The following day was a mixed bag of mundane busy work. Gray did the mining, Mechanoids tended to the wounded, I continued to work on the crop fields and grow some more plants, and Reika was assigned to do various construction duties all around the base. We filled in that last wall piece to the northeast, and I figured it was about time that we actually started to hunker ourselves down with proper sandbags and cover. Working with whatever that we had our hands available to with the nearby trees was only going to work for so long. All we needed was one well-coordinated raid, and, well, things would be going south really quickly. On a completely separate tangent entirely, love is in the air tonight. Gotta say, that is one really effective way to cheer up a depressed fox. Look at Reika winning the 10 waifu points right there. Anywho, the next day I began to realize that our storage was really inefficient and starting to become overloaded with all of the weapons and crap that we have been hauling back to it, so I built a small steel weapons locker just to tide us over for a little while, at least long enough to expand it a little further. I also wanted to work on the bedrooms just a little bit to make them look a bit prettier. I smoothed out the walls in my and Reika's room, and then all around decided to add a little bit more furniture into things just to increase the beauty factor. Eventually we're going to add in flooring, but that is not quite yet. I also wanted to add a little filing cabinet next to our research center. Praise be to science. Beyond this, however, I just decided to throw down a tailoring bench schematic that we could work on in our leisure. I figured it's about time that we start to look at what we have for our clothing, even though right now we can definitely repair everything that our colonists have thanks to the repair kit mod. I just need to go ahead and research that. Oh, and we also got hit with a caravan, like in the middle of midnight when everybody was passed out for the day. Luckily, caravans love to just kind of fart around for a really extensive period of time, so we were definitely able to trade with them in the long run. I don't know if I got that industrial ammo. It might be a second trade that I do later on down the line. At this point in the video, I don't really know, but we definitely made off with 2 planetarium teas just in case we had another prisoner that was a rabby later on down the line and we didn't have the proper research for it to take care of her. And then we moved over to making deep storage. This, by far, is definitely my favorite mod on the list that we have. Deep storage mods make it so that it takes a little bit longer to go ahead and dig through individual storage areas that you have. However, you can kind of just stack a bunch of things in one area, so it just makes one place for a stockpile infinitely more useful and effective because it's 5 times the storage effectively. And then something miraculous happened next. While creating a fox fur cat hoodie, upon bended knee I decided to ask Reika to marry me. She accepted. Oh boy, love is certainly in the air now. This means that a marriage will ensue at some point in the coming future. Oh, fraptious day. Oh, and if nobody knew, Narwhal was definitely RPG's last name. This was randomly generated. I didn't choose Narwhal as my last name. I just thought that it was really funny, so I decided to keep it, which means that Reika will be changing her last name to Narwhal, so, yeah, I thought that was funny. Back to business, however, even though the cat hoodie should just about do the trick to keep Mechanoids warm for the winter, we can still do better with hats and gloves and scarves and all that other nice stuff that we can get from mods, so I decided to keep just working on those in due time, and we'll just get those bills out over time. The next day, I decided to prioritize on research. We needed to stop planetarium research immediately and move over to industrial generators. We don't necessarily need them, but if I'm going to expand our power grid, which we definitely need to do, if we're going to wind up getting heaters for the winter, I would rather just use the industrial generators since we'll be keeping them long term. Ergo, this was our new focus. Aside from gathering rice, this about summarizes everything that we did on this day. I did, however, try to do as many preparations as I could in terms of moving stone blocks and then moving anything else off to the side to be able to expand that storage room. And then come morning, lo and behold, once again our storage spaces were completely loaded to the brim. This was starting to get ridiculous, and we needed to work on this as soon as humanly possible. We were clearly running out of space for everything. So this very quickly made it to the front of my priority list, and I'm glad that I did so. This was definitely needed. The only other optimization that we need to do for storage in the short term would probably be our refrigerator to add more deep storage in there. A bountiful rice harvest ensued after this, which did not fit inside of our fridge, so I had to immediately move over to doing fridge deep storage after that. Go figure. There we go. That looks much cleaner. The following day, I decided to send Rayaka out to disassemble some ship parts because it's much easier to do that now than after 5 years of wealth buildup, so might as well tear the band-aid off of that one. During that little task, a wild Fengguang decided to drop from the sky out of a drop pod. Feel free to fill me in on the comments section how badly I fucked up that Chinese pronunciation, but either way, I decided to rescue this little fella. Usually I don't do this or really care too much about animal drop pods, but we are talking about a magic Chinese chicken that gives everybody a 5 mood buff that's around it, so yeah, you know what? I'm gonna go out of my way and save it. I see no real downsides to this. So the following day was mostly used to nurse the happy chicken back to full health. We also obtained the beer brewing research and decided to work on espresso machines next. Finally, a good cup of coffee. Shortly afterwards, the chicken decided to join our colony, and 2 ship fragments fell immediately next to the base. Of all things, it decided to land on the heel root patch. Yes, that was quite unlucky. Either way you look at it, it's still definitely worth its weight in components and a bit of steel, so you know what? It's not a complete loss to me. But do you know what is bad? Getting raided from 2 different angles in a pincer attack. Yeah, this one didn't work out as well as I had hoped that it did because I didn't even see the second group of people, so it just resulted in a pincer attack where they were using my own sandbags against me. It wasn't the cleanest fight in the world, but you know what? It was one that we definitely emerged victorious with, and it was not nearly as bad as it could have been. 2 of the 5 raiders also took fatal damage when they were taken out, which is just yet 2 more graves to add to the pile. Can you take a guess at where this is going, ladies and gentlemen? The following day, RPG digs out all of the graves and manages the burials. Yet another weight to be added to his conscience. But hell, at least the espresso machine is done being researched, so at least he can get some caffeine inside of his system to drown out all of the depression. Huh. What do you know, this is starting to sound a little bit familiar. Later on that night, we were attacked by a flock of maddened muffalos. We prepared for attack. After the muffalos had charged at our base, I decided to set up our colonists at a choke point, positioning Grey and Meganeko on the front lines for obvious reasons. No casualties were to be had. Meganeko and Grey are about the closest thing that we can get to a door when one does not already exist in the first place. And they don't even have riot shields yet, so that's going to be something hilarious to tinker with later. The following day was, honestly, pretty nice and uneventful. We butchered those muffalos since they did not rot from Scaria, so we got a lot of good resources from them, and nah, I'm just kidding, this is Rimworld, there's always shit that winds up hitting the fan. Solar flares hit today. And solar flares mean, obviously, that our solar panel is not working, so we're not storing anything within our battery. Yeah, we really need to get those industrial chem generators up soon. I figured by this point that there's no greater way to spend a foggy, rainy, disgusting solar flare-tainted day other than harvesting ambrosia bushes to the north. So fuck it, why not? In all seriousness though, these were just about ready to be harvested, and this is going to be quite a bit of money for us. We can't really do anything with it to turn it into ambrandy yet, so rather than just worrying about that stuff, I just want it on standby so that we have a money source. This of course is going to spike our wealth up a little bit too, so just take note on that. The following day, Rosa makes a full recovery, the rain clears, and I decided to work on flooring in all of our rooms. This is already turning up to be a better day than yesterday. And while I was at it, I decided to do some planning to figure out how I was going to expand current buildings and where I was going to place future ones, like a hospital. This is going to be the ultimate plan in the end goal here. I think it'll look nice in the end. We're going to start work on the workshop first, though, before anything else. I basically wanted to do a joint room with a hallway in the middle of it, and we're going to need a lot of heaters to be able to get this going. I am assuming probably 3 should do the trick, since it'll be such a large room. The idea is to have a workshop over on one side, and then have our rec room down towards the center in the bottom right there. Since we'll have both of those all set up right there, like I had mentioned in the last episode, this will make it so that there's a ton of room buffs that everybody will gain from walking into this one singular room, since it's going to be a laboratory, a workshop, as well as a rec room. So they'll be getting a really decent mood buff from all of this, and this is what the full goal of building this entire room is going to be for. Entirely based off of moods, and it's just going to look nice all together. For good measure, I went above and beyond to make sure that I plotted out where we were going to put future bedrooms for colonists later on down the line. And then, interestingly enough, there was a transport pod crash that had a Rabby inside of it with a service rifle and some ammunition with it. I obviously sent Meg and Echo to go ahead and search the spot way off to the east to go ahead and capture this Rabby, and as unlucky as it could have possibly have been, as soon as she arrived at the spot, this Rabby woke up and just ran off at the side of the map. It was that close. So I mean, I guess we get a free service rifle out of it, but I felt completely robbed and sent another raid from a Rabby faction afterwards. I checked the number of points that we had from wealth and all that other stuff, so I just, set it up to a 250 point raid. The point isn't necessarily to get a colonist out of it as much as it is to make sure that we can return said Rabby so we can get goodwill out of it. And luckily, Nolan turned out to be a Molotov thrower as well, rather than a Rabby that had an assault rifle, so we got kind of lucky on that front, because I would have definitely felt like we cheesed something by getting 2 good assault rifles out of the Rabby faction. Having at least 2 assault rifles for our main shooters is going to be a game changer in combat scenarios, because we're just going to extend our range by that much. We may have started off with a lot of tech, especially when it comes to making weaponry and armors, but that's one thing that we don't have is precision rifling, and there's a good reasoning for that. I think it would have been a little too overpowered if we could just make assault rifles at the beginning. Either way, like I said, I am not planning to capture Nolan as an actual colonist to use, so we go ahead and we release her. The rec room / workshop is also starting to look quite nice. We have almost all of the walls down right here, so things are starting to look pretty decent. I just wanted to make sure that we had flooring up and everything else to make it look really pretty afterwards. So it's not going to serve as an extension immediately when we have it in there, and I'm just going to leave some walls open so the colonists can walk through it. Seeing as it's snowing, I decided to do a smart, and I did something that I never actually did in my previous playthroughs of this game, and set up a snow shovel area for where our walkways are going to be. Yeah, that's one thing that I never actually thought of in Rimworld, is that snowfall will definitely impede movement, so anywhere where your colonists are going to be normally and regularly throughout the course of their day, you might as well shovel the snow there. It's kind of like reality. Tuckered out, our colonists decide to call it for the night, and the tiling is starting to look really good in our bedrooms. And fuck, the plants are starting to die from the cold, son of a bitch. Everything that didn't immediately die from the ensuing cold overnight, I decided to harvest the next day because, well, obviously it's just going to die otherwise, so might as well grab everything that we can now. So that basically cut our harvest for anything healroot in half, which is unfortunate. Also, we got almost no cotton out of that one. So you remember what I said at the beginning of the episode about how cotton was going to bite me in the ass later? Well, there you go. We have no fucking cotton anymore. All because my dumbass decided to plant potatoes instead, so yeah, I guess I'm a big dumb poo-poo head. In all seriousness, though, this isn't the end of the world, at least. It's a little unfortunate. Not even necessarily because we need cloth for clothing, because we can just use fox fur for all that kind of stuff. But, I mean, I really needed the cloth for making repair kits to keep things functioning, especially for the clothing that was really hard to obtain. Either way you look at it, though, things are still looking really nice in the base. The flooring is completely done in the bedrooms. We have actual upholstery and furniture sitting inside of there to increase the beauty values, and the prison has been expanded to hold quite a number of people now for larger raids. The base looks really nice right now. We were raided the following day, and honestly, it was one of my more favorite raids of everything that happened during this recording session. It went through pretty smoothly, nobody died, it was really incredibly clean, except for the fact that our shots just weren't landing. The one main mistake that I made while I was trying to do the flank on the right side was that I was so focused on the dude with the shotgun in the front line that I wasn't paying attention to the real danger, which was the man in the back line that was using a revolver. And let me tell you, that thing did a lot more damage than Shotgun Guy. 2 people tried to run away, we were able to down one of them, and the other one escaped, so yeah, take that one how you will. All in all, though, it was a pretty fun firefight. We tried to take everybody back in the best shape that we could and immediately tend to their wounds, but I believe literally all of them but one died of blood loss, which is incredibly unfortunate. And then we were hit with a massive, I mean massive, arrow fleet flock afterwards for a man-eater hunt. Did I say man-eater? I meant manhunter. I guess they're the same thing, though. It was at about this point where I decided to toggle with storyteller settings and toggle everything down to 75% raid efficiency, by the way, because our raids were just getting absolutely massive because of the fact that I had put down all of those walls and it just spiked our wealth that much. Things are starting to get a little bit difficult to deal with 4 people when we don't have really, really good equipment, so we're just gonna wait and maybe spike that up later. I know we're managing just fine, and honestly these raids really aren't that bad or that difficult to deal with, but again, we're not dealing with kill boxes here to slow things down, and on top of it, the storyteller has a tendency to throw raids back to back at you, and I'm just afraid that we're gonna wind up getting hit with like 2 or 3 raids of like 6 people, and I don't know how our colonists will be able to deal with such a threat. So I'd rather just tone things down now and then bring it back up later on when we know that we're good. 75% isn't even going to tone it down that much anyway, so... Either way, Grey handles the raid single-handedly just fine, however it leaves behind a really massive fire that burns the remaining of our heal route, which makes things even more annoying and harder to deal with in terms of trying to save anybody that we wind up getting into a firefight with, so, yeah, medicine reserves are not looking too hot right now. So after spending a long time trying to do recovery on this incident and pick things up, you know, bodies, etc., just all the cleanup and all that stuff that winds up happening after raids, we wound up getting our research for industrial generators, fucking finally, holy shit. Yeah, Rimworld has a tendency to literally completely throw you off track of whatever your goal was before because random events just completely sidetrack your ass, and then you're like, oh wait, what was I supposed to be doing? I completely forgot about industrial generators until now. Next on the agenda of list for researches is going to be the item repair bench, because we are definitely going to need it to repair some of the original clothing that we had that was made of synthread, because it's just really good clothing, and we do not have synthread right now, so yeah. Yeah, that's going to be a thing that I would like to have. I removed Meganeko's medic bag and just made it as a disallow any kind of contact with it with colonists, just so that nobody puts it on and it doesn't degrade any more than it already is until we wind up getting repair kits to fix that thing. It's one of the many reasons why I want that bench. Also, we were hit with another eclipse. Did I mention that one? Yeah, eclipses and fucking solar flares just happen constantly now that I have a solar panel. That's how it always works. But let's go ahead and end this video off on a high note then, shall we? There is one last matter to attend to, and that is Fox and Rhaega's marriage. This was triggered manually because I figured that it would be a lot more sentimental if it was just triggered during winter time, right when it immediately begins and once everybody's health bars are pretty much gone. There we go, they got married in winter time, and it was a lovely time for everybody. There is always a light at the end of the tunnel, ladies and gentlemen. There is always something to contrast the bad and the ugly, and of course where there is light there must always be shadow to complement that. Whether that was profound or cliche, that is up to you to decide, but either way, that is going to end the video, ladies and gentlemen, so catch me next time when I decide to do, I don't know, something to extend upon this. I have to think it through, so that'll be that. I will see you guys later on. There is much to do in this playthrough. We have only just begun.